briefly.
Perfect.
Okay?
Thank you.
All right, so how should I do this, Georgia? This way? Yeah, this,
Yeah, that's the way the writing is.
Yeah. This is 7.
that would be south, north, well.
This is north, south.
Okay, good.
Look, there's your.
There's, all right, so I think it's fairly well marked here, but you can see this is East McDowell Road, this is 7th Street. Construction area over here, he's pulled over here.
Okay.
I mean, obviously, this wasn't taken at the time this happened, but this is just to give you an orientation of, here's the Walgreens we talked about.
All right, so how does this help? Does this particular image help us at all?
Yeah.
And
Was he
tell
heading
me
east?
about that, Paul.
Was he heading east or west? The
Okay.
driver?
East.
He was
Say,
heading
which way was?
He was going east.
He was going east.
Coming from 7th Street to going to 37th Street. East.
Ted, didn't you just say he was going that way?
Yeah, you had it. You
Yeah,
were
I'm sorry.
He was parking right next to the
He
construction.
was he's going east. So he would have been pulled over here. And this, obviously, the construction was over when they took this picture. This picture was taken fairly recently.
So the construction was where the McDonald's is?
Yes.
No,
On that
no.
side of the street.
It was on the north side.
Yeah, I think we have to.
All right, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Georgia, you know.
Well, okay, this is 7th Street. The 15th Avenue and McDowell is over here. That's where the homicide. And Mr. Garcia is going to 32nd Street and McDowell to the Trojan Horse. And the construction was on the north, I believe we said northwest side.
Georgia, I
Yes.
think, or one of you, I mean, either one of you, perhaps we could put up the diagram. that
Yeah, this
was
is-
a
this is a good
recreation,
idea.
a recreation of the
Sure.
drawing done during the deposition for your client. And if you show that to the camera, and maybe you can use that, and it'd help.
Show it
get
to
us-
the camera first,
Want to
Georgia.
show it to the camera
Oh,
first?
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, just a second.
All right. Now,
Just
East directions where he's going. Because he's going.
Oh, there's a little thing. Up in there, right?
Well, this is-
Okay,
No, if he was heading
This will be
east, he
okay.
would
He
have
was
I got it, I got
south
it.
side of the
This will be,
road.
the
15th Avenue.
This is 32nd.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, I got it, I got it.
Okay.
Okay, all right, here's the,
Was where the circle.
you see, we might not be able to see that. Yeah, Georgia, good idea.
show and tell. Here we go.
Permission to approach granted.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Okay, I'll explain it in just a second. Okay. This is the diagram that was drawn by the officer. Okay, I'll stand up here for just a second. Okay. You've got north, south, you've got east and west.
East.
Okay, east and west. Any rate, this is all I can tell you, okay? Is that he's heading, Mr. Garcia is heading, in this direction.
Back
to-
towards a circle K.
Well, see, that's why, yeah, no, he's not heading to, trust me, he's heading to the Trojan Horse. He's heading to 32nd Street. All I can do, they gave me this, 32nd Street in McDowell, okay? He's heading east.
Yeah,
That's
Georgia,
all I
if you
can say.
remember during the whole deposition, there was a lot of discussion about which way was north and which way was west
Yes,
and which
and
way
they
was
had them all
east.
turned around, and
And so,
everybody has different
the
diagrams.
diagrams there.
Everybody has different diagrams pointing in different directions. All I'm telling you, and I think Ted will agree, is that he was heading east from 15th Avenue and McDowell to the Trojan Horse, and the construction was on the north side of McDowell.
Correct.
And that much we all know. But everybody has different memories of directions and where they're headed, okay? That happens when you have
So that
police
diagram
involved
would be
actions.
Wrong then, right?
Okay, so, based on now seeing the diagrams, other than directions, what questions do you have, Paul?
biggest question, like, because that diagram looks like he was pulled on the north side of the street, pulled over on the north side. In that case, he would be heading west.
Yeah, the diagram is wrong.
Yeah.
So let's get that. I mean, the main thing about the diagram that we kind of want you to get from this is ignore everything except kind of what the police cars and the,
Just
just
this.
assume.
Police cars
There
on
you
the
go.
There,
side.
just looking at this, okay?
Yes.
Except then they'd be back.
That's the configuration.
That's the
Okay.
configuration. That's what we want you to see from this. Then, and again, during depositions, things get confused.
Alright.
So, what other questions you have, Carol?
So they're pulled over right next to a construction site?
Yes.
Okay. In the right lane?
Yes. Stephen?
So, was there any other eastbound traffic in the left lane?
Do we know about traffic? I'm not sure.
There's not a lot of information about traffic, other than it was nothing atypical for 3 o'clock on a Friday in February. That's about all you can say.
Okay, what else?
I asked this question earlier, and I don't know if you're gonna answer it later. Was he armed? Because this is a concealed carry state.
Okay. I think we can go ahead and start talking about that now. I said I'd get to it later, and that's exactly what I'd like you to do. And I think, Colleen, you have a question, maybe, but question is, was he armed? Ted, was he armed?
He was not armed.
Okay, do you disagree with or agree with that?
He did not have a gun.
He did not have a gun. So what difference does that make?
Was he reaching for something in his pocket?
Okay. What do you think?
Yes.
And why? What is it you've heard so far that makes you think that?
I don't see any other reason why he would shoot at him.
Okay. What else?
Did he get out of the car?
Yeah.
Why don't you tell us what he did just before he got out of the car and whether or not he got out of the car?
Okay.
Now, have you fill in the details, yeah?
Before Mr. Garcia got out of the car, Officer Lane could clearly see Mr. Garcia moving within the car, moving his body and his hands out of sight of Officer Lane, so he could not see his hands. So he saw movement in the car, and then the car door opened, and then he got out. Do you want me to say anything more than that?
I think there's one other thing he did before he got out that you might fill in.
Oh, he tried to make a phone call to his employer saying, I'm late. I mean, it's 3 o'clock and he's supposed to be at the Trojan Horse working at 3 o'clock.
Okay. Any of
But
that?
he hung,
Okay, I'm sorry.
but
Georgia, go ahead.
he didn't make a connection. He hung up.
Okay.
And then he got out.
Anything you disagree with that description or you need to fill in?
Well, I think there's more details, but I don't disagree with that.
Yeah, that's what I know, and I'm gonna give you a chance to talk about those details in just a minute. Okay, so he's moving around in his car, so what? Does that make any difference? Carol, tell me why.
For a gun.
Well,
Registration.
it raises the other possibilities for the officer who does not know if this is the person they're looking for.
Okay, Kim, what did you say? I thought I heard you say something.
If I was an officer, I would just assume he was reaching for the gun. I don't know why. I was thinking of, I'm from Cincinnati, and they had the same thing, the riots that happened there.
Oh, yeah, sure.
This whole case makes me kind of back to that, because I was there and I had to leave town.
Okay. And Paul, did I hear you say something?
If he's moving around the car, he could be going for registration or something like that. That's what I'm-
Okay. And Les?
Or he was extremely nervous because he might have had marijuana or something on him when he was hiding.
Okay, so he could have been hiding something, looking for something, hiding something. What else?
If I were the officer, I'd be a little concerned if I had seen the cell phone. Maybe he was calling for his own backup. That was just around the corner, so that would make the officer even more
Maybe he was
concerned.
calling for his own backup.
His buddies that were just
Okay,
down
so
the
you're
corner
talking about Mr. Garcia might have been calling for other people. Okay,
to hurt the officer.
okay. What else? Yes, Patience.
I would think, maybe if he didn't have the cell phone in his hand, if the officer didn't see the cell phone in his hand, and then he starts moving around, and then he's on a cell phone, then we would believe, okay, well, maybe that's what he was looking for. There's also the possibility that he's looking for a gun, but it's most probable that he was looking for the cell phone if he appears to have a cell phone right after he starts moving around.
Okay. So, about how far were these apart, either one of you? Were these vehicles apart?
50 feet?
There are various estimates, 45 feet, 50 feet, 40 feet. It just,
Yeah.
people have different estimates
The
in
subject's
that range.
vehicle and the
And
officer's
and
vehicle.
Officer Lane's vehicle.
It sounds like a large distance.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a large difference.
Okay. So the patient says, well, wait, Officer Lane should have been able to see that he had a cell phone. What do you think? Carolyn, you're saying maybe?
Maybe not from far away. Who knows what that thing is?
Okay. What the rest of you think?
Well, if it's a cell phone, he would put it to his head. If it's a gun, he wouldn't put it to his nearest face.
So if he could see what he was doing,
Yeah.
it makes a difference. Okay. Good.
Were the windows tinted?
Now that's a quick question. Were your client's windows tinted?
Not as far as we know. No, they weren't.
Okay. They weren't. Patient?
That brings me back, if they're so far away, then why did they think that they could yell at the suspect with construction right next to them and think that he would be able to hear them?
Okay.
Well, with the distance between the cars and all, it's, the cop is assuming he's got the murderer there. He's not assuming that it might be the wrong person, or he would have pulled up closer. And normally you would think, oh, he's reaching for his license and registration. It seems like he immediately thought, I've got the murderer in front of me.
He, the police officer, was immediately thought, why? Tell me again, why was thought
Well,
that?
he left so much distance.
Okay, so you think that was
When-
Mr. Garcia's choice to leave that distance there? Is that right?
That's
Yeah.
the
The
police
way-
officer's choice to leave
Oh,
it.
okay.
When I've been pulled over by a cop for speeding and all, they're pretty close to my back bumper. And yeah, I see the lights, I pull over and I immediately go to my glove compartment to get my registration and my insurance card.
Is that part of the felony stop?
That's
They have a certain
Remember,
distance
she
that
can't
they-
answer until,
Oh.
so,
It
what is it you'd like to know, Paul?
I would assume with a felony stop, the cop's not gonna get up right behind the guy.
So you'd want to know what, if
Leave
there's
some
a
distance.
specified distance with a felony stop. Okay. And what else?
Could it maybe have been on the subject that if there was maybe some disregard of the officer? He saw him looking for something in the car, that maybe he disregarded the officer's directions and decided that, maybe the officer needs to take another protocol because he's not listening to the officer's directions.
Okay. So what else do we need to know here? Larry.
At what point did he get out of the car?
Okay. Let's take, when did your client get out of the car? And what did he do?
Well, do you want me to fill in the gaps before that, or you just want me to say when he got out of the car?
Better fill in the gaps. Thank you, David.
He, when he got pulled over, he looked in his side mirror. He rolled the window down. He was expecting the police officer was going to come up to his window and ask for his identification. That didn't happen. He looked in his side view mirror and he could see that the police car door was open and that the police officer appeared to be behind the door of his car. He could hear yelling, but he couldn't understand what was going on. He was afraid. He looked for his cell phone and that's what he was doing in the car, was he was trying to get his cell phone off the seat so he could call his boss and say, look, I'm going to be late for work. And he dialed the number, it started to ring, and then he discerned something about get out of the car. He hung up the phone, and he opened the door, and he got out of the car. Do you want me to stop there? Keep going, just a
I
couple
think
steps
getting
further?
out of the car is far enough, but anything there that you feel like you need to add details to, Georgia? Add details to the details you
No.
added to what you said?
No.
Okay. All right, so what do you think about, let's take each one of them. What do you think about Officer Lane's actions at this point in time? What else would you like to know about what he was doing or not doing? Yes, Susan?
Seen some time had passed before maybe you could, the subject could have, Mr. Garcia could have understood him. Was he did he get mad? Was he,
Which one, when you say he, the
The
Officer
officer.
Lane, or did Mr. Garcia get mad? Which?
was Officer Lane upset that, he's relaying all these instructions to Mr. Garcia, and did he let emotion take over and something, he had said that, he heard him get out of the car, but, at what point, did he get out of the car? How long had elapsed? Has it been a long, is there a
So
certain?
you'd like to know how long from this point in time
Right,
that
is
he
there?
was pulled over until he
to-
got out of the car? Is that what am I saying that correctly?
No.
What length of time? Okay, then
No,
help me out.
so since the officer's relaying, it's a felony stop, you have, he's giving him instructions, throw your keys out. Obviously, Mr. Garcia is not comprehending that, and he's making a phone call and such. At some point he got out. What was the amount of time, between that? And, was the police officer, was he flustered at the subject's,
Well, let me ask you a little bit about that. I think this is the police officer was police officer flustered. I'm going to let you folks discuss that when we let you deliberate. Okay? I'd like you to discuss that. These lawyers will give you two different answers to that. I will tell you that right now. So I'd like to see what you think. But I want to go back and I'm supposed to be. How many police cars were behind him at this point in time? Georgia?
At this point, there were four. There was Officer Lane, then there was Officer Lane's car is here. Officer Terrell's car, I'm not using any diagrams.
You don't wanna use it?
No, Officer Terrell's car is next to him.
We've
But
got to, we can take this off. You can draw it if you'd like.
behind, yes. Excuse me. I'll draw if you give me something to draw with.
Oh, shoot, we
Right
left
there.
that downstairs. Oh, no, there they are, right there.
Who's wrong?
Right there next to you. We did bring it. Thank you.
Perfect. Think of it this way, and we've got, I'm not worried about the directions here. Let's see, we've got, do you want to turn that around? Can I see this again?
Yeah, sure.
Which one was it? This one? How did you do it? It's like this. This is the way we've done it now. Okay. We've got Garcia is here. Okay. You've got Terrell. Oh, so let me start over there. Take that off. You've got Garcia. You have Lane. This is obviously not to scale because there's about 40 feet here. You've got Terrell.
And we say,
Officer
Okay.
Terrell.
yeah, okay, thank you.
And then you have Officer Columbus comes back over here behind, and then right back here, they believe, is an Officer Adams. So that's the configuration. Garcia, Lane, he's got his door open, Lane is here. This door is open, Terrell comes around and stands behind this door. And then you've got Columbus is here. So that's how the doors are. So you've got 4 police vehicles, officers behind each of those doors, Columbus behind his door, and then Adams pulls up a bit later. So that's the typical configuration of a felony stop.
Now, in terms of that configuration, is there anything you feel like you need to add? Or just make sure we get to the.
Oh, that's right.
All right, tell me, folks. Go ahead, Charlie. What were you going to say about that?
Is there any video footage? Do they do that in Phoenix Police?
No.
Didn't get video of this one. Sorry. What, I just, that's, calling your boss, is that something that you do if you would stop like that?
I want to call a lawyer.
Under mask.
Wendy, good for you. High five. Oh,
If you've never been pulled over before.
I've never been pulled over
And you're
before.
confused, you might be concerned about your employment because you're a parent and you don't want to lose your job.
Okay, so, reasonable. Stephen, what do you
Yeah,
think?
I was, I guess I've been pulled over before, and I I mean, I know people that are police officers, you know, I guess I've always just, you know, waited till they come up, you know, you don't make any sudden moves or do anything that, you know, gives them cause for concern. But again, you know, if you've never been pulled over, if, you know, I mean, and we don't know Mr. Garcia's background, you know, how long has he lived here? You know, if he's from the Middle East, you know, stuff like that.
Well, let's
So,
just,
you know,
let's just fill that in real quick. Ted, how long have he lived? Tell us about his background real quick.
He's from Ohio. He's been living in Arizona for about 2-3 years. You want more information? He's worked in various jobs. He's been he's done construction work, and he's been a cook mostly.
Okay.
Is he a United States citizen?
Yes.
Okay. Stephen, I kind of interrupted because you'd asked about that, and I thought to
yeah,
clarify.
that's kind of what I wanted to know, because, you know, like, you know, someone that maybe has only been here for a year or two, you know, may not, you know, their culture may not, you know, have experienced, you know.
Okay.
You know, the other thing I think probably should be added at this time is he has no criminal record.
Okay.
Is that fair?
Yes, that's fair.
That's fair. Okay.
I was gonna say, if I was pulled over like that, that would scare me. I drove across the state from here to New York.
Uh-huh.
I was pulled over in Ohio and the place where our president is from. I forget. Yeah, and both times I was pulled over there, I didn't have my seatbelt on. So as the officer pulled behind me, I put my seatbelt on because, you know, we're being from Arizona, and it scared me to death because they had 2 officers come out, and they took me out of the car and they put me in the front of the car, of the police car there. And usually in Arizona that means you're going to go to jail. So, and I paid the speeding ticket right there. So maybe there's, since he doesn't have a criminal record, maybe there's some kind of, you know, that they should take that into effect maybe. That, you know, his background with that, I mean,
Yeah.
even
Okay.
though it's a felony stop.
Yeah, so I mean, she brings up a point, and I'm not wanting to ask anybody to share information that I have, but obviously if you've been, you know, everybody's been, you know, I'm gonna put it this, is there anybody here that hasn't been stopped for a ticket or any reason ever by a police officer? I find that very unusual. Okay, so we've all been stopped before, and our reaction. So tell me, Larry, what do you think of Mr. Garcia's reactions?
I think he was nervous.
Okay.
With no background of criminal and all that stuff, and seeing all like 4 police cars and not being able to hear Officer Lane speaking. I think he didn't know how to react.
So what should he have done?
That's a really good question. I wouldn't know what to do. I've never being from Los Angeles and there's all kind of gang activity and everything. I still wouldn't know what to do. It's never happened to me, but so.
Okay. What do you think, Susan?
I think that you had raised it earlier that maybe at that point, if the suspect is not listening, maybe they should radio. Is there some kind of protocol where if they're not responding, do they call, you know, do they call for backup or some kind of sergeant in that case if they think that he's going to be a problem?
Okay, patience.
Well, I think that if he doesn't even know what's going on, maybe he's been pulled over before, but maybe my first reaction would be, all right, grab the registration and the insurance.
So moving around in the cars.
Yeah, moving around in the
Okay.
car. Like,
As far as you're concerned. Okay.
and grabbing a cell phone or just picking up my cell phone and looking at my cell phone or something. Because when I've been stopped before, last time I was stopped was up in Michigan. I sat there for a while while the officer, I think, ran my plates or something. So I was just sitting there waiting for like 5 minutes before the officer even approached my vehicle. And if he hadn't been stopped before, even just a regular traffic stop, then that would add even more to the confusion, because I remember the first time I was stopped, I didn't even know that I was supposed to pull into a parking lot, and I should pull on the side of the road.
Okay. What about the rest? Paul, what do you think? All these reactions.
I mean, if you can't hear what's going on, I think you said that he picked up a clip of "get out of the car." I think that's what I would do.
Okay, so we've got him out of the car. And I suspect we'll get two different versions. Take it only. So I'm going to ask Ted to explain what happened next and Georgia to comment on that. Yes, Georgia.
So he gets out of the car, and he turns around and looks in the direction of the police, and he puts his hands over his head. He's still got the cell phone in his hand, and he starts walking towards the police.
Hold on a second. I just heard Colleen. I hadn't intended to interrupt you here, but Colleen just went,
Yeah,
Very noticeably. We all heard it. What was that about?
Well, when he said the cell phone was in his hand, which surprised me, but I can see where people would do that. That, to me, is a little scary, because the police, from that great of a distance, especially all those cars, they don't know what's in his hand.
Colleen? Or Caroline? I'm sorry, Colleen. Just what do you think about what Colleen just said?
I kind of agree with that. That made me cringe a little bit because, well, I mean, I hate to put it on like an international scale here, but cell phones can be used as other things too. So even if it was a cell phone, it's still not outside of suspect.
Well, okay.
What kind of cell phone was it? Was it a smartphone?
Why does that make a difference?
Because if it was a flip phone, that would more look like a pistol, because it's got a curve to it, than a smartphone would.
Okay. What kind of phone was it?
It was a Droid.
What in the heck is a droid?
I-
Somebody help me out here. That's a droid?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, it's a
good.
droid.
That's a droid.
Everybody has one.
Okay, so it's a droid. What difference does that make? Does that look more like a gun, less like a gun?
It's not a flip, so. like-
At 3,
So it's
at
not a
3
flip,
o'clock
so
in the
less
afternoon-
something.
At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, it wouldn't look like a weapon.
Why not, Larry?
It's
Why
silver
not?
flips.
It looks like a phone.
50 feet away?
And if it
50
was-
feet away?
If it was sunny,
Yeah, most of the cars,
you would get
They're training.
you would get a shine off the screen.
yeah,
Okay.
He did put his hands above his head. I mean, that's kind of like a.
internet.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, geez. You
Don't
didn't
shoot
like
me.
aim the phone at somebody or like make a hostile movement. It seems like he, I don't know what to do. Like just.
Okay. What the rest, go ahead then. I interrupted you because I had to find out what that reaction was about.
Well, do you want me to, can I add something about the phone?
Sure.
It's a Droid, but it's in a silver case. So it's not black, or not all black. It's got a silver case. He's got it over his head, and he's walking towards the police because he can't hear them.
Okay, let's stop there. What do you think about that action? Carolyn's going like this. Say that out loud, Carolyn. Tell us why.
I agree. I understand. I'm putting myself in that situation. I can't hear it, but I'm not going to walk towards police who are all
Why not?
standing there in front of me because that's an act of aggression in a way. Well, it could not be, but it
Okay,
could
I
be
want to get,
perceived.
before we say let's go to statement number C. Thank you, Carolyn. How shall I phrase this? Carolyn says, I would not walk towards the police. Let's say it was okay for Ally, A-L-I, to walk towards the police. It was okay for Ally to walk towards the police. Tell me if you agree or disagree with that and why. And Georgia, I haven't let you comment
Right.
because we were getting this, but I will give you in just a
Sure.
moment.
There's one thing I wanna know, like, before I can.
Let everybody answer first.
Okay.
Okay, I want to get the
Well, it's
answers
about
based
him
on
walking
this.
towards the police.
I understand, but I want to get, if we had one more piece of information and these people are answering, something happened, then it complicates my analysis, okay? Maybe. So, it was very tempting to say, please be patient with that, but I won't.
Heard it before.
Can everybody answer that? All right, Patience, what were you gonna ask about that?
I wanted to know, how fast was he going towards the police, first of all? And also, was he trying to communicate with police? Was he trying to say anything to them after he got out of the car?
Then I'll let you go ahead and fill that in, and Georgia, I'll let you comment about all this, and we'll take it.
He was walking slowly and he was yelling, "I can't hear you."
Could the officers hear him say, "I can't hear you"?
That's a perfect segue to go to Georgia. Would you go ahead and fill us in about what happened at this point
Okay,
in time?
well, let me pick back up as he steps out of the car. He steps out of the car, and he has his hands over his head, and in his hand is the phone, the Droid phone that's in the silver metallic cover. The officer says to turn around and walk backwards to our car. He does not walk backwards. He repeats it several times. He doesn't do it. He continues to walk forward. He kept walking toward them. The officer said he saw that he had something in his hand. He did not know what it was. He could not tell what it was. So he told Mr. Garcia that he thought it was a weapon, so he told Mr. Garcia to put it on the ground. And he kept saying, "Put the gun on the ground, put it on the ground," because that's what he thought it was.
Did he use somewhat more colorful language than that?
Well, at some point later, he
Oh,
did.
it was later?
It was just a bit later. He thought, that is, the officer Lane thought that he was armed. He said he just stared at us, looked at us, and kept coming forward, and that the look on Mr. Garcia's face was one of anger. And that's the way the officer describes it.
Now, I understand that you have that a little different, and but I want to get the reaction to that. Stephen?
Okay, so we know we have two police officers at Officer Lane's car. Do we assume that as Mr. Garcia is walking towards them, they both have their weapons drawn on him? I guess,
No,
you know,
yes, we do.
if I was,
Stop walking.
yeah, so I mean.
All the police officers there,
All
I
the
think,
people-
had their weapons drawn.
Okay, so I mean,
Coming forward.
right, I mean, I guess if I'm in that situation and the police have not, you know, if I'm seeing that they have guns pointed at me, I'm probably gonna stop.
Did he drop his arms at any time? walking
We'll get to that.
forward?
Let you just keep trying to get ahead of me. I appreciate that, but we will get to that in a minute, whether he did or did not. But I want to take it to this point, and I still want to get the reaction to him walking towards these 4 police cars. Carol?
So I'm thinking, like, he's eastbound, right? Now he's turned around facing west. It's 3 o'clock in the afternoon, so it's like kind of bright. Was there an impairment in seeing what this thing was?
Excellent question. Do we know if there was any sun in anybody's eyes at this point in time?
No.
No,
No. No, we don't
And I
know, or
didn't even
no,
know.
there was not any sun.
I just mean.
we don't know.
We don't
And
know?
nobody's mentioned it one way or the other.
It hasn't come out, through the course of investigating this, we suspect somebody would have mentioned that, but we can't say that it was mentioned as a yes or a no, but only that nobody brought it
I
up.
was thinking when it's silver and there's sun,
Well, there's a reflection.
it may not be something you can easily identify.
Again, that's something that hasn't been addressed here. Patient?
Were the officers able to see him shouting, "I can't hear you"? Did they see his mouth moving? Did they see him trying to communicate?
Or could they hear him? If he couldn't hear their instructions and they couldn't hear him, then it just kind of gives, clarification.
What do you think? Do you think officers could hear some?
I mean, if he was saying, "I can't hear you," and then he started walking toward them, I mean, that could explain why he was walking.
And that's where I wanted to go. I mean, I asked you, what do you think of Mr. Garcia walking towards them? But if you're 4 police officers here, and this person starts walking, what do you think? What is a police officer? What's your thought?
He better not drop his arms.
Okay, so dropping the arms is key to that. Okay, what else? Anything the police officers should be doing different at this point in time? You know, it's one thing when he's in the car, it's another thing when he's out of the car walking towards. Is there anything that you folks can think of? And I know you don't have training as police officers, that you think as a lay citizen that police officers should have done. Patience? What?
I would think, okay, this guy hasn't listened to any of the instructions. He's coming towards us. He's got his hands in the air. He's walking slow.
Towards 4 guns.
Towards 4 guns pointed at him. Maybe he can't hear us. Maybe we should try and get him to be able to hear us. Like, he
Okay,
hasn't
so
listened
you
to
think
any
the police should
instructions,
apply,
he's
okay.
just,
Susan, you had your hand up next.
Maybe, I don't know, if the police, if they can't hear him, if there's this barrier and they see his mouth moving, do they consider that maybe he's suicidal or a threat to himself?
That came up earlier, let's ask him about that.
Or
What do you
drugs,
think?
or-
Could
Was he
Garcia see
suicidal?
the guns? Could Garcia see the guns drawn? I mean, if I was a police officer.
He certainly could see that a police officer would duck down behind open doors.
Yeah.
Now, and I don't think there's any testimony that the guns are actually outside where they can see it. Is there any
'Cause if he
testimony
couldn't
either
see
of
the
you recall?
guns, I mean.
Yeah.
Where the
Well,
guns
He'd
were
still be
visible?
walking. Yeah.
Well, they can't be
Maybe
behind the
still
window, that
walking.
wouldn't make sense.
No.
I got.
Obviously, you see
Yeah.
a gun, you
So-
freak out, you don't see
I
it.
think he's aware there's a gun.
Yeah.
All right.
Upon
Yeah,
walking
we're aware
forward-
that there are guns out there, yes. Let's do this one at a time because I want to get everybody. And so, okay, let's go
Upon
ahead.
walking forward, did he end up getting close enough to where a taser could have been used instead of the gun?
You're just always one step ahead of me. That's my next question. And that's good. I'm not being, that's good that you are. But at this point, he's walking towards his guns. What should the police officers think? What should Mr. Garcia be thinking and doing? Carol?
Is anyone gesturing, like, get down, get down?
It's a good question. I don't know the answer to that question. Does anyone know the answer to that question?
They are, all we know is they're shouting instructions, or I should say Officer Lane is shouting instructions
Okay.
as to what to do.
Okay.
Do we know exactly that it was just Lane telling him to get down?
Well,
Yeah, I know. It's always, that's all right, George. That always happens. Georgia, you have permission to answer that
thank
question.
you. At this point, when Mr. Garcia is not following the instructions to put the gun on the ground, stop and put the gun on the ground, other officers chime in, stop, put the gun on the ground. I mean, that's what they're all yelling, get down. They're all telling him the same thing at this point because he continues to move forward.
Ted, do you agree or disagree or have something to add to that?
No, I agree with that.
Okay. So, yeah, so tell me, Larry, how does that make a difference in terms of how you view the responsibilities of each?
I'm sure most of us can agree that it was obviously some kind of language barrier, communication error. And so, like, if everybody's talking at the same time and there's one and there's all these Berettas pointed at this guy, it's like, obviously, who is he gonna listen to? You know, so if they're all yelling stuff at him, what should he do? Should he?
So you think
down?
they did the fact that additional officers tried to communicate actually confused the
Yeah, I think
situation
it
more?
confused them
Okay.
even more. Yeah.
All right. Well, I want to get back to Susan's point. Is Mr. Garcia suicidal at this point in time? Is this, death by cop? Is that going on here?
I mean, I don't see why he would be. I mean, if he was on his way to work, how did he suddenly go from going to work to being suicidal? If
But the
somebody's
cops
suicidal,
don't
they're
know
not
that
thinking
he's
about
on his way to work.
There you go.
Okay.
So they figure,
So,
if suicide is running through the officer's mind, they might be thinking, this guy just murdered somebody, he ain't gonna wanna go on death row or prison, he might as well, take himself out too.
yeah.
And take to somebody else more.
So how does that affect the responsibility of the police officer if that's one of the thoughts that may be going through their minds?
The responsibility of the police officer should be to save his life and not take it if he's trying to commit suicide by cop.
Go ahead.
I'm thinking also that officer's thinking, well, there's 4 of us back here, and maybe he wants to get close enough to throw like those things you throw and you pull the pin or
Right.
something like that.
Some kind of
So
grenade
maybe-
thing?
So maybe it would be 4 lives, not just the one.
Okay, yeah, and only brings up a good point. I mean, you say you should try saving, but isn't he more of a threat if he's suicidal and has a gun?
Hasn't
Stephen?
Lane,
Well, I think too, like, it's hard to speak for, police officer, but, they're thinking, I want to go home at the end of the day, and I want, all of my, friends to go home at the end of the day. I mean, and when you're put into a situation like that, I mean, I'm sure that, adrenaline and, you're thinking, okay, here we're all yelling at this guy and he's still walking towards us, he has something in his hand. And I mean, I'm sure cops are scared for their lives
This
as
is
well.
very much the crux of what the jury's going to have to decide.
I disagree.
Whether the police should shoot or not shoot, and when they can and when they shouldn't. Oh, well, that's why you disagree.
Because if his arms are above his head, okay, it's gonna take a second to get down. It only takes, what, a millisecond to pull the trigger. So if the cops are already pointed out, they're gonna get a shot off before the guy drops his arms to get a shot off at them.
Okay, I'm gonna come back to that. Yes, Susan?
I have a question about the force. Since it's a felony stop, does that rule out like tasers or like, you hear about like beanbags?
This is what Les was saying earlier. So let's talk about that. When does the police officer decide to use a taser or, as you say, beanbags?
Do they
You
have
know,
options?
do Phoenix police officers carry those kinds of things, Georgia?
Officers carry tasers. Not all officers have the beanbag shotgun that you're referring to. The
Okay.
use is.
Do we
just
know
not
whether,
there.
yeah, do we know if either of those were available and or were both available? I should ask both.
We know that all officers have tasers.
Okay.
That much we know. We don't know about who, if any of them, because they're not, on beanbag shotguns, not every officer has those in the trunk of their car, which is typically where they're kept. Do you want me to say anything more about tasers?
No, I want to see what their reaction is. So how do you decide whether the police officer should have used a taser instead of a, Wendy, help me with
Well,
this.
the officer ran the plate. When the guy pulled over, he ran the plate. It
Mhm.
comes up that there's, if the car came up in Garcia's name without tickets, and it cross-references with one little push of a button right to the driver's record, and he saw nothing. Lane is assuming that he's got a criminal in front of him, where the information on the screen in his car should have made him assume that he didn't have that.
Is there a relationship between, if he didn't have any traffic tickets or any previous criminal, does that mean
To
you
me,
should,
it
what does that
does.
mean in terms of what the police should do?
Well,
Steve?
I mean, you can look at it like that, but I mean, you gotta start somewhere, right? You have to have your first, robbery. You have to commit your first murder. So, I mean, you might not have any kind of criminal background, any tickets, and you go out and you shoot your first person. Looking at a computer screen and seeing that he doesn't have any kind of warrants or criminal history, I mean, I don't know if that really, gives you the full scope.
Well, that's true, and you don't know if the person who's the car is registered to is the person driving the car, so.
Okay.
When a felony stop, they don't run the plates right away. They just want to get the person out of the car, and then they run the plates after that. Check the VIN, correct?
Go ahead, Nancy.
Typically, yes.
Yes, Carol.
What's the range on a taser, and are they in range?
So that'd be one big question is, was he within range? Was it even possible to taser him? Yes, Blair?
Did any of the other three officers have the what is it called?
Beanbag.
shotgun.
Yeah.
Beanbag shotgun. Okay, we don't know the answer to that question at this point.
I disagree with this statement saying that you have to commit this and commit that to be a murderer. I mean, that would totally throw out the gentleman in Scottsdale that's, killed his two kids.
Mhm. Okay.
He was a real estate broker with no criminal record before he did that. So, I mean,
So Wendy says, well, maybe no criminal record, maybe we should look at things a little differently, but unless you say, no, that doesn't have any impact. Is that correct?
murder most of the time isn't premeditated. It's more boom right there. And premeditated, well, yeah, that can be, you think about it 5 minutes ahead of time, but most of it isn't planned over time. It's more spur of the moment.
Okay. Okay. Yes, Karen?
What was it you just said? I'm sorry. You
I said a lot, I don't know.
About premeditation?
Oh, about the record. To me, if there wasn't any record, then they're just unknown. You don't know. But if they do have a record, I would certainly
Oh,
see
okay.
a policeman taking that as consideration when approaching a person.
Okay.
You should take consideration at any time doing a felony stop. Pull them out, then investigate.
Okay. Well, I keep saying okay because we're going to listen to you folks talk about that this afternoon, these things. I'm hoping you'll bring these kinds of things up when we'd like you to discuss it without us here. So what do you need to know next to decide about the reasonableness of what you know from the beginning? There was a use of lethal force, or we wouldn't have started this discussion about that. So you know that now, and you know up to this point that he's out of the car. What's going through your mind right now? Jared, what is it to you?
I'm wondering, I mean, did the suspect do anything other than just walk slowly toward them, maybe move his hands down
Okay.
to cause them to think he was, putting them in danger?
Well, that's it. What else? Anything else going through your mind?
He could have looked away, looked down to the side, and then causing the officer to worry what actions he's gonna physically take.
Okay. Susan?
If, I want to know which one was the shooting officer, and if it was one of the other officers, do they have to take cues from the lead officer
Okay.
on the?
Georgia, why don't you just go ahead and fill that in?
When I answer that at some point.
Whether, I'm not sure I understand. I see the note, but I'm not sure I understand it. Oh, yeah, I do.
Okay, I'll wait for you to tell me.
Okay.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Who did the shooting? We don't know, I mean, obviously we started, use of force, so we know there is shooting. So go ahead.
Officer Lane.
Officer Lane. Why does that make a difference to you, Susan?
Because I think Georgia had said before that Officer Lane was the first officer on to pull him over, and he's the primary officer, so he's the one that makes those decisions, is what I think.
Okay. And George just handed me a note that I forgot to answer a question about the range of the taser. Excuse me. And George, can you tell us a little bit about the range of tasers and their use?
Yes. You can deploy a taser effectively probably 15 to 17 feet, no more than 20 feet away. That's a maximum, because what happens is it shoots out to 10, 15 feet before they become incapacitated.
How close was the subject when he was?
Do we know if he was close enough to be tasered, either one of you?
Yes, we do.
He was not.
He was not close enough. He was approximately 40 feet away.
Okay. At this point now.
So he only moved 5 feet forward.
Well, up 5 to 10 feet, because it's a range of 50 to 45 feet, and he moved forward about 10 feet.
Okay. All right, so tell me, you're all figuring it out. What happened next?
Got shot.
Why? Wendy, why?
'Cause
Probably went to put his phone in his pocket.
Officer Lane was a little zealous.
Okay. Les says because of something that your client does, and Wendy says because of something your client does. What else? I'm going to just fill it in. Let's fill out this page. What the heck, we got the whole page here. Instead of a yes or no, I agree or disagree, put statement is Mr. Garcia was shot because, and then just write, and it's not agree, disagree. I'm using this a little differently than it's written. And write down why. What you think happened next. And we got two versions. One of them has to do with the officer doing something. The other one has to do with Mr. Garcia, the suspect, doing something. Okay. Oh, it's still a few people writing. All right, I'm not sure. We're going in the courtroom. Plaintiff gets to go first. So, Ted, tell us what happened next.
As he was walking towards the officers, his cell phone rang, not loud. He had said he had the sound turned down, but it also vibrated. He turned his head sideways to try to hear better. He did hear the word ground and was intending to lay down on the ground, but before he was able to do that, he tripped. And as he tripped, he was falling forward, so his hands came down to break his fall. And at that point, he was shot 3 times, one in the shoulder and twice in the abdomen.
Now, I think there might be a different version over here on my right, slightly different version of what did the police officers perceive happened at this point in time.
Well, at this point, Officer Lane is telling Mr. Garcia to get on the ground. He uses colorful language with a number of profanities. You may use them?
I don't know.
I don't
I think
think
everybody knows what police
A
officers are
number
saying
of,
at this
but
point in
he
time.
is trying to be
Well, I think it's
clear
important.
and as.
Okay.
Because I think it shows his,
Good point.
You want me to use it?
This is why we have both of you here. Yes.
Okay. Officer Lane is trying to be as clear as he possibly can and make sure that it's unambiguous. And so he says, quote, "Fucking get on the ground now, you motherfucker, or I'm going to fucking blow you away." Okay? That's what he says. At this point, well, Mr. Garcia has stopped at this point. When he's saying this, the phone rings, he turns his head, he starts to walk or take a step, he does something, and the officer sees him lunge toward them as his hand's coming down, and he perceives it as a lunge, and that the object in his hand, which he's told him repeatedly to put down, is a gun, which is what the officer perceives, is going to be used to shoot him or one of his other fellow patrol officers. And he fires in self-defense.
Okay. I want you to turn to page 2. And yes, you probably have lots of things you want to ask, but we're going to wait until after lunch. So here's the drill. We are going to ask you your opinion here about which side you believe should win the case at this point in time. We know you might change your mind. We know you don't have all the information, but in order for these lawyers to figure out the best way to present this to 12 people just like you, we need to know your feelings right now and why. So if you would fill out just page 2, tells us a little bit about how you feel right now, who should win, and tell us why.
Before we do that, this goes back to the stop. Was there any pictures or anything taken of the ground to sustain the fact that the plaintiff is saying that he tripped over something?
There were no pictures of that taken. No.
Okay.
Well, you had a chance to hear what happened. And, you know, as a jury, you would need to decide, was the use of force reasonable? And who was right in this situation? So what else would you need to know at this point in time to be able to figure that out?
Why did he shoot him 3 times?
Yeah.
Okay? Several of you want to know why they shoot him 3 times? We'll wait till George gets
excessive.
back. I'm going to try to get to questions and then come back and get them all, because sometimes I find out when we get started. So why 3 times? What else do you need to know? Susan, what do you need to know?
Did all 3 shots come from Officer Lane?
Okay? Who shot 3 times? What else you need to know?
Did all the
Blair?
officers involved feel that there was a threat? Or
What were the reactions of the other officers? Okay?
And how did the other officers feel about the guy that shot him, if he was ever said like racial marks or anything like that?
Okay. What was
What was said by the officers when they found out it wasn't a gun?
Okay? What was said? Okay. All right. What else do you need to know? Larry, you had something. You had your hand up a minute ago. Did that get covered?
I was curious if any other weapons were used besides just shooting.
All right. You know, what weapons were used? Okay?
Thank you.
All right. What else? Carol?
I know you guys talked about the officer like swearing during it.
Mhm.
What's the policy regarding that?
Okay. Policy regarding swearing. Okay? We'll cover all of this. What else do you need to know? Stephen,
Did they find anything on the car after the shooting?
what was in the car? Okay?
Was the plates Arizona plates?
Okay. I'm going to come back and ask some of you why. Okay, what else? You understand why I like to get all the questions before we start answering them? Patience.
I'd like to know if the officer ever apologized to the guy.
Okay.
Is the guy still alive?
Okay.
Yeah.
Do we know that yet?
Yes.
Yes, we
Oh.
heard that he was
Oh,
alive.
I was wondering if his family was suing or.
Is the officer back on duties or still on
Okay.
leave? Because I know they're placed on leave for administrative reasons.
Great. These are wonderful. Karen.
Are we Are we allowed to know whether the officers had previous incidents like that?
Okay, oh, the history of the officer, sure.
Yeah,
I'm not sure we can answer all these questions, I just know these are all ones that
I
we'll
would
see,
want to
check
know
with
more
the
about
lawyers
the
about.
officer, about his life and stuff, like if he was in Army or Marines and something.
The police officer?
I kind of got like when she's the tone from that he was maybe former military or something.
Okay.
If he was in Iraq.
Okay. I've got to ask, what was it Georgia said that made you feel that way?
I've just heard Marines when they're drunk.
Oh, okay.
That's what she sounded like.
All right, good, thank you, Kim. I now understand, yes, Susan.
Did the officer swearing the way he did that cause the plaintiff, or the suspect to trip?
Okay.
Is that what made him stop?
When holding the phone, was it cupped or did he have his hand wrapped around?
Yeah, okay. These are great. Then this is so important because what these lawyers need to know is what's going on in the minds of the jurors. What do they need to know? Because sometimes they leave out a very important fact and they don't mean to. Karen?
Are we allowed to know where he got shot?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sure.
Shoulder, abdomen.
Twice in the abdomen, once in the
Oh,
shoulder.
sorry.
I'd like to know how many times it happens here. I'm not from here, I'm from Ohio, so how many times in Phoenix that cops do that and actually shoot someone?
Shoot first, ask
Or
questions
how many
later.
cops actually get killed by other people that are
All right.
armed?
I'm getting all these? Yes.
I wouldn't normally ask this, but I just watched the movie Flight, so it might be in people's mind. Was there any kind of alcohol content in either the victim and the officer's blood?
Okay. I'll expand that to drugs too, okay?
Yeah.
All right. That's normally no one's going together. Okay. What else?
Psychiatric history, both.
Yeah.
Okay. Helen?
I don't know if this counts. I was just wondering about the ability of the person that was shot. Is he walking or?
Yeah, what is the
chair,
status?
Stuff like that.
Okay.
Oh, hearing status too. Does he have a hearing problem? Because he couldn't hear a lot.
Oh,
Or was
okay.
it construction?
This happened right around the proposition that they, for the, I don't know what you guys called it, prop something, 1020 or 1070?
I'm not sure either. Stephen, okay, so what is the problem? Whatever.
I've only lived here 4 months, I've heard about it.
The SB 1070?
SB 1070.
It's where.
Tell me how that, oh, I'm gonna ask you, well, did it happen around?
It's a
the
racial
road?
thing.
Yeah.
Hispanic.
Racial profiling. You know, I mean,
It's just the ability to ask for citizenship on a.
Sure. Okay, good, excellent. Very good questions. All right, Steve.
How long had Officer Lane been on duty that day?
Oh, okay, that's good. Now, I may get, all right, let me explain to you kind of
One more
how this
question.
works. One more question? Okay, let's,
does the officer wear glasses?
okay. Here's how this is gonna work. I'm gonna try to get all these answered, and if we come up with some more, we're gonna do that. There's a couple things you need to know. One is, I may ask you why you asked that question, if it's not blatantly obvious, and even if it is blatantly obvious, because sometimes I ask why you asked that, and I find out it's not at all what I thought the reason was. So you'll have to excuse me if I ask you why, and you say, well, of course, it's such and such. And second, there are what's called rules of evidence. And in Arizona, it's a stack of books, literally about this tall, about 4 on 6. And it tells judges and lawyers what information can be presented to a jury. Sometimes it makes absolutely no sense for a particular case because a committee of lawyers and judges get together and write these rules, and the legislature gets an impact on some of them too. And so they have to write them for every case throughout the entire state, so it may not make sense. So we are not going to answer them. If either one of these lawyers tell me that based on Arizona rules of evidence that would not be admitted. In fact, you know, if you've ever been in trial, there'd be a lot of times where you'd see where they have to get everything admitted. They'd ask the judge to admit stuff. So if it can't be admitted in this case, I'm going to have to apologize. Can't answer it. It may not make sense. It may frustrate you. But like I say, these rules have to be written for every case. And then we're gonna try to go through each one of these, and the only other thing is as before, I'm gonna let both lawyers give you answers, especially unless it's a very specific question, because there may be different perceptions of this. I gotta ask one more thing though, is there anything else that you would like to know from anyone?
What were the ages of the suspect and the officer?
Okay, ages. Okay. Yes, Wendy.
Ali Garcia, is he American born?
Well, let's go ahead and start with that one. I frequently do this as I start and work backwards. So do you want to tell us a little bit about your client, Ali, including his military history?
His mother is of Middle Eastern descent. His father is Hispanic, hence Ali Garcia is his name. He is a natural-born U.S. citizen. He served admirably in the United States Navy, and he has been, until this event, he's been a normal working individual. As I said before, he's primarily worked as he's been cooking since he was 4 or 5 years old. He loves to cook. He's worked as a cook in anywhere from Denny's to other restaurants, and was working at this Greek restaurant called it Trojan Horse at this time. And he's also had experience hanging drywall and other construction type
Okay,
work.
good. Does that answer your question?
And how old is he?
22 years old.
So that make any
29 years old.
Yeah.
29, I'm sorry.
My officer's 29.
Yeah. Your officer's 29? Well, I've got it written down.
Interesting enough, that's a question you don't ask your client usually until
Yeah, I'm sorry,
it's
guys.
important to put in there.
Yeah. Did you see the birth date?
That's okay.
It's okay.
It doesn't matter.
25 years old, right?
I think that's correct.
Yeah.
Okay,
I'm
25.
sorry.
What difference does that make, Wendy?
Young boys tend to be stupid hotheads.
Okay. So it's 24, a young boy?
I'm 24.
Yeah. Yeah, be careful, don't look at Paul when you say that.
Sometimes.
Okay. So Paul, a 24-year-old young hotheads?
I don't know if I'm a hothead. I'm a little crazy.
crazy.
Skateboard, I get hurt all the time. Broke my ribs. I mean, that's all I mean.
See,
So how does
crazy.
that affect our view of,
I would think
City
though,
and-
because he served in the Navy as well, that
Mhm.
he would be more mature and more aware of
What to do?
yeah.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Georgia, but I was right. He's 29 years old.
Oh, he was 29?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
At the time of his deposition, so
Okay.
that would have been,
Well, I don't know that I have one. Okay, I'm sorry. I apologize.
no, it's all right.
I think before we got a perception of him that he was recently here from the Middle Eastern and he didn't know very much English. He didn't know what was going on, but now they know that he's educated and he was in the Navy.
And
Kind
that-
of different.
Yeah, that's great, Kevin, and the lawyers have now learned they need to get that up sooner up front and earlier in the case, so that's the kind of reason we do this here. So that make you feel kind of more or less likely to view this case
I don't-
one direction or another?
I think he should have known not to hold a cell phone in his hand. I don't know. Being in the Navy, you should, with a weapon.
So
you
that
should
actually,
know that.
so learning that he was in Navy actually makes you lean a little bit less towards
Yeah.
being sympathetic.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Karen?
And following instructions. I mean, people in the military are better at that, I would think.
So what do you think? What do you think happened here then, in terms of him following instructions?
I mean, I would think he would be more empathetic to the police officer's position, having been in sort of a military situation himself,
Mm-hmm.
rather than being a civilian who doesn't know anything like, most of us.
He could have immediately started having a panic attack, you know, anxiety attack, and coming from somebody that suffers from, you know, you don't think straight for a little while, and maybe he just had so much going on in his head.
Anxiety, okay.
Yeah.
Aren't you supposed to be trained in the Navy to control that though?
Anxiety is really, it's different on each person.
If you've been overseas, then, then it could be worse.
Well, that's why I asked about the cop too.
Yeah.
Maybe he has something against Middle Eastern people because he was in another country in war or something.
And
Okay.
I think a little bit of the opposite, that, because I have boys that are 19 and 29, I think that they're still young and have life ahead of them and maybe not know not to walk toward the officers. And both those boys, if you see their hand or their head, you see the cell phone. It's just part of their skin almost.
John Q. Public should know, I mean, there's only one way to hold a gun, and if he's got it in his hand, depending on how he was holding the gun, that's why, or the phone, that's why I asked that. There's only one way to hold a phone, you know, especially a droid, they're that big. How can he not know that?
So when you say how can he not know, does that make you feel more or less likely to support the plaintiff in their view? Or the defendant in their view?
Support the plaintiff.
Okay. And I understand, you can change your mind several times as we go through this. All right. Well, let's take, somebody said we need to know a little bit about the police officer. So, Georgia, tell us a little bit about Officer Lane.
All right, Ted was correct. His client, Mr. Garcia, is 29. Officer Lane, Richard Lane, is 26 years old. He graduated from high school. He went enlisted in the Army. He served 4 years. He was, and I read this, he was, it says 19 Delta Cav Scout. So
What the heck does that mean? Anybody help me out with that?
That's his
19
job
Delta?
description.
Pardon?
That's
That's
his
his job?
job description.
What is it? What is his job?
I have no idea.
It's Iraq something, isn't it?
No, like 12 Bravo is a combat engineer, 19 Delta is probably an MP.
I can't provide any more information except,
Does it say
other
that?
than that.
Does it say
Google it.
And then he worked after he got out. He was approximately 22 when he got out. He worked at various jobs until he enrolled in the applied for a position with the Phoenix Police Department. He went through Police Academy, which is approximately 20 weeks. And then he went through Field Training Officer, where you have a field training officer and you shadow a superior officer, so you learn how to operate on the street. And then he's been a solo patrol probably for about 9 months,
Okay.
give or take.
So we know a little bit more about these two people involved in this. You know, anything particularly stand out amongst with that information?
They both served in the military.
So what does that mean? Does that help us out one way or the other? You know, Kim says the fact that the plaintiff served in the Navy makes her think, well, he should have known better. What about the rest of you?
At the same time, like, I'd like to know, have either of them gone overseas, or were they just in the military? My
In the
sister was
war.
in the National Guard for 4 years, but she never went overseas.
How does going overseas make a difference in terms of evaluating their actions in this
Because
situation?
when you go overseas, when you go to war, you have to be aware of your actions at all times. You become, I believe you'd become a lot more aware of what you're doing, just subconsciously, as
Okay.
opposed to someone who hasn't gone overseas and who hasn't had to deal with that real life situation where if you're not aware of everything around you, you're dead.
Okay. Excellent.
We do have information on that.
We do? Okay.
Well, my plaintiff, my client, Ali, was a jet engine repair person on a submarine, and in fact traveled, as submarines do, all around the world. I don't know if Georgia can tell you about it, but Officer Lane, I know that Officer Lane was in the Army and was a Delta Force soldier in the Army, which, as I understand it, is similar to Navy SEALs, or, you know, they're not just infantrymen, they are charged with more sophisticated operations. And I believe he was overseas.
He was deployed for a period of time, but the amount of time is unknown.
Okay? So how's that help figure out kind of which of these two people are right, what they say? Delta Force, that's kind of interesting. What's Delta Force mean, Colin?
I've just seen that movie, Delta Force.
Delta Force, yeah, the
something.
movie, yeah.
It makes me think that, just knowing that makes me think he made more of the right decision, because he's been around that type of thing. And the other, Ollie, was a jet engine repair guy. But I'm sure he'd have some training, but I wouldn't think it's thorough.
Submarine, he's worked, he was deployed on a submarine.
I mean, he didn't have like
He didn't have,
people
Yeah, not direct.
shooting at him also.
no,
Okay.
but people that go, get submerged like that have to be very stable.
Oh, okay, so the fact he's on a submarine makes you think that psychologically he had more stability? Okay, excellent.
What
No.
I noticed what Ted said, when you guys weren't gonna say how he talked to the guy and his tone, and I wanna know why he said that was important, cause that's what I picked up from that, was something from, something like a flashback or something in Iraq that you know, as Middle Eastern.
Oh, I see.
That's how, it sounded like what.
What do the rest of you think? Why was Ted so interested in making sure Georgia, and that was my mistake, not Georgia. Georgia wanted to quote it too, and that was, me
That's when I
wasn't
picked
sure
up the
whether it
Army
was
thing.
appropriate or not.
The tone.
But why was it, what do the rest of you think about why is the fact that he used the F word so much important?
Made him sound more aggressive.
Yeah, it
Okay.
kind of shows us his state of mind at the time, what he was thinking, how his emotional state.
Yeah, don't sound like he was patient enough.
He was in
I
an
think
attack
because
mode.
he'd been overseas and he was in the Army, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Army's more, they have more combat experience is what it makes me think. So if he'd gone overseas, it makes me think, okay, he was a soldier, possibly in Iraq. And it would make me think he's more likely to shoot first, ask questions later, like you would do in the Army when you're at war.
Okay.
And I didn't have so much of a problem with his swearing as much as I have a problem with the statement about, what was it?
Blow your effing head off.
I have a problem with that because I feel that's unprofessional. And
How should police officers get the attention of somebody
we
who?
will shoot, be very clear, but don't be like, it just has an emotional meaning to it. Or an
It sounds like a
unprofessional.
threat, yeah, I mean, you don't want a police officer threatening you, or obviously if he doesn't want the suspect to react with violence, then he shouldn't react that way toward them.
Right, it escalates it, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
on the police officer side, if they work in bad areas, they need to talk like that to people, and they're used to talking like that to get a point across to them.
So, yeah, that's what I'm wondering. Do you get a point across to somebody who is a burglar or murderer, whatever, by being polite?
Well, that could be true too in Officer Lane's defense. I mean, he had been trying to communicate with, Mr. Garcia, but to him, it seemed like he wasn't listening or paying attention or just kind of shrugging him off. He didn't know he couldn't be hearing him.
Okay.
But the officer should have had the forthright to understand that right next to him was very loud construction, so give him a break. You don't have to.
But
Yeah,
then you gotta
actually,
think-
you got right where I wanted to go. I'm trying to think whether had you folks write this down or just tell us out loud. Tell us out loud. I want to go around once, and I'll start with Larry, and we'll go around this way. Tell me, Officer Lane should have, finish that sentence for me. And I'll give you a second to think about it, or all the rest of you think about it. Officer Lane should have. And I'm going to go back around the other way, and then have you tell me that Ali Garcia should have.
And we're talking about the verbiage.
No, not the verbiage, I'm just the whole thing, this whole situation with the stop and the car, just right now I'm kind of doing this as a sum up. Not just the language, but if you want to deal with the language, feel free to add that. Okay, Larry, I've given you a little time to think there while I was talking.
Well, I think being his military experience, and he had more experience in the military than he did as a police officer, but all that experience, he should have been more patient with the victim, suspect, whatever we called him at this point. He just should have been more patient and more understanding and realized that there's construction and there's other officers and that he might not actually be the person that he's looking for.
Okay, Wendy?
The officer assumed from the very beginning when he pulled over the car that he had a murderer in front of him, and he never changed his mind, and he just kept rolling into more and more.
So he should have,
He should have been willing to admit that maybe he had the wrong
Wrong person.
person
Okay.
and rolled it back. Instead, he rolled it forward. It was like he got in this attack mode and he just kept going, working himself up further and further and further.
okay, Colleen?
I wrote that maybe he should have spoken clearer and simpler. You know, the Wall Street Journal is written in 9th grade level, so you don't know who you're dealing with. Maybe those types of words aren't as understandable as just clear and still screaming, you know, but I don't know.
Okay, Carolyn?
The officer, realizing he didn't have the proper communication system, should have found a different solution for that, possibly gestures, possibly bringing down a notch, like taking a moment. Is that ever taught? I mean,
Okay.
young boys.
All right, well, we're not going to answer for a minute, but I want to get to him. Okay, good. Patience. Look, Officer Lane should have.
He should have been more aware of his surroundings, and as soon as he saw that he was quite a distance away from the suspect and there was a lot of noise, he should have asked another officer, hey, we need to use your car and use the PA system on your car.
Okay, Susan?
I believe that Officer Lane should have used, he started out using a good amount of force, but when the suspect wasn't cooperating, he should have been more aware of his surroundings. I mean, you know, he's been trained in military ways. I mean, you know, to be a fighter pilot, I mean, to fly those, they don't just let anybody fly those planes.
Okay.
So I think he should have used more of his skills internally that he's been taught
Okay.
to control the situation.
Les?
It's standard operating procedure for officers to wear Kevlar. So what I believe you should have done is asked one of the other officers to provide cover so he could move forward and, you know, express what he needed to say, so
Okay.
that the defendant could hear him.
All right.
I just think Officer Lane should have had a little better control of his emotions. Just, you know, the situation he was in and everything, and, you know, knowing he had backup there, knowing, you know, he needed to get control of the situation, just, you know, better control of his emotions.
Okay, Kim?
I honestly don't think the officer should have done anything. I think I mean, I sound like I'm against him because of the war and everything, but if it was me and I saw something in the hand, I would probably shot him too, so.
Okay.
I don't do anything different.
I didn't tell you could say that, but you can't say officers should have done nothing different. That's okay. Paul?
I think he should have tried to find a way to make the guy stop approaching him. I think maybe standing up a little taller, aiming the gun at him, like, get down, like, don't come closer, or something like that. And maybe not shot 3 times. If you get shot once, you're gonna be hurt. Like,
Okay.
I think 3 was a little excessive. Like, I'm trying to kill you, pull off your head or whatever.
Jared?
I think he maybe probably should have tried to remember that he's there to kind of diffuse the situation, not escalate it through, you know, language or you're doing things that might influence violence, I guess, or cause the situation to get out of control.
All right. And so you don't have to go first again, we'll wind up back over here unless you happen to have it, but somebody tell me, and I'll get all of you. Ali Garcia should have. Susan, start with you.
I believe.
Or you can say shouldn't have, I guess I'll make sure to say shouldn't have.
I believe Ali Garcia was maybe in the beginning, maybe, you know, he was unaware why he's getting pulled over. I mean, but he did get out of the car. He made it aware based on that he heard the officer, you know, say get out of the car. You know, he's been trained in the military, so he should, you know, he should have made gestures to maybe diffuse the situation. Maybe he should have just stayed where he was, you know.
Okay, Patience?
He should have just stayed in the car.
Okay, Carol?
He should have stayed in the car and followed whatever instruction he could, and not carried anything in his hand.
Okay,
All I can think of is, you know, left the phone behind.
okay. Wendy?
Left the phone in the car.
Larry?
Just get out the car and lay down on the ground like near the car.
Okay. Jerry?
He probably shouldn't have started approaching the police cars, just stay still.
Stay still. Okay, Paul?
I think he should have, once he saw the guns drawn, I mean, I can understand him, hands up, approaching the cops, trying to understand what they're saying, but at a point, like, you have to realize their guns are drawn, you can't hear them, you can't keep going forward. You're gonna get shot.
Okay. Kim?
He should have dropped the phone and got out of the car and put his hands up and stayed next to the car with his hands up.
Okay. Steve?
He should have just got out of the car and stopped.
Yes.
If he was gonna make a phone call, maybe he should have called the police department, tell him he can't hear him.
Interesting. Okay. Okay. So I think I've checked off all the questions you asked. I got to ask, and I'll tell you why I'm asking it again. Is there anything else you want to know about this situation that you haven't heard so far?
Yeah.
Yeah, Jared?
What was the trip like? I mean, was it just a little stumble, or I mean, how was it that the officer assumed that he was lunging toward him?
Well, you're going to hear two different versions of that, I think.
Because a lunge is a lot different than a fall.
Right. I mean, if somebody's tripping over a rock or something, you can obviously tell they're tripping.
Okay. I'm going to let you folks talk about that. What else do you need to know? You heard the two descriptions. They're slightly different, and we can go over them again, but I can tell you that the officer felt like it was a lunge. Mr. Garcia felt like he tripped. Yes, Carol?
Were they both like honorably discharged, or was there any issue in their
Yes, they
pulse?
were.
Is this
What
a
else?
question that you're gonna answer later? Did he have it cupped, or did he have his hand around it?
Oh, yeah, you've asked that question. Do we know how he was holding the gun? I don't think, remember reading that. Anymore. I don't know if you- What was that for you? I'm sorry.
I think it's fair to say he was holding it the way you would expect him to hold it.
Yeah.
He was holding it in his
His
hand.
fingers down.
George?
He had it
Just
cupped.
holding it.
Just hold. You're nodding your head. Why does that make a difference? Well, I gotta ask. This is one.
It makes a difference, but I'll keep that thought to myself for now.
Well, what, do you think
Why?
he's
Tell
holding
me.
it like this?
No, go ahead, Les.
No. I would assume if his hands are out, he's holding it in his hand. And John Q. Public, if you're looking at somebody's hand like that, you're not gonna think that's a gun.
Yeah, you know, also, phones aren't really that big. Like, mine's pretty big, but it's not that big.
Okay.
Like I have tiny hands, so when I hold my hands up, like, I don't know how you could see that this is gonna, even if it had a silver case on it.
If it's
Like
3
if it's
o'clock.
a man, like I would think a man's hand would almost be covering it.
If it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the officer's gonna be able to see the butt of the gun. Okay, so if you're holding it in your hand like that, there's no way that anybody's gonna know, or you'd come to the deduction that that's a gun.
Okay.
You'd have to be,
40 feet away.
40 feet was, that's
Yeah.
right.
And it's silver, so it could be.
this room is 40 feet long. I could stand at the back of that room and tell that he's holding a phone in his hand.
You wear glasses.
With my glasses
That
off,
was
I
your
mean,
question,
yeah.
that's why I said it.
But I think we're, I mean, talking about it in a room and saying, you know, I can see things. I mean, it doesn't put us in Officer Lane's shoes. It doesn't put us in Ali Garcia's shoes. I mean,
I was gonna ask
for
you.
what we see, you know, a police officer and, you know, who is pulling over someone that could have possibly just killed someone, and, you know, an individual that, you know, wonders why he has 3-4 police officers sitting behind his car pointing guns at him. I mean, that's totally different than, sitting.
So how much do we, I mean, I think you're all right, but how much do we plug in, what Steve was talking about, the emotion of the moment, in terms of what either one of these people did? Susan?
Well, I think what you're saying, Stephen, is great, because, my husband, he's an avid shooter, and he likes the guns that are really small, and he has a couple of little guns, he likes those ones, that he, because he has a concealed weapons permit, that he can carry it in his pocket, and they make them where, I mean, they don't look like cell phones, but, I mean, they're small enough that it can fit in your hand, and I mean, I've shot it, so, I mean, and he has one that's black, but I've seen him in silver, but, I mean, they, maybe his military training, kind of slipped in, and, some kind of an emotional toll saw that, that's a gun.
But then you gotta come down to common sense. What murderer is going to step out of a car, put his hands over his head with a gun in his hands? That's
All right,
just
you guys are
asking
getting a
for
little
shooting.
ahead of me now. You're into that deliberation part. So I'm just gonna say this because I've been doing this for a lot of years, and I am a little bit surprised that nobody said, "Were there any witnesses?"
I thought somebody did in the very
I said
beginning.
We asked about the
Oh, you did say it, and I missed Larry. My apologies, then.
And
Thank
Georgia
you.
told us there were none.
I think she said there was no witnesses.
No.
Interesting.
No,
Okay.
I didn't say that.
You did.
Yeah.
That's why I said,
I think we just asked about what the other cops thought and about everything.
Okay. Well, that's kind of, those are the two things I was surprised that had been more. So I think we'll start with the other cops. I think we can dispatch that a little easier. And then these folks would like to, I guess, would now like to know, were there any witnesses? Georgia, were there any witnesses?
There were witnesses.
Did, were there witnesses?
Absolutely.
Construction.
Okay, good. So let's first talk, before we get to that, let's talk about the other police officers. Have there been any statements taken of the other police officers?
No, there were not.
Okay.
Repeat that question.
What?
Were there any statements taken of the other police officers?
Oh, that's odd.
Well,
That's a little odd, Georgia, they think. Can you explain how that happened?
Yeah, it turns out right after this, there were 3 additional officers out there. 2 were deployed overseas. Nobody took statements at that point. There were no depositions taken. And one of the officers moved, and nobody seems to know where he went. So
there was no
witness-
internal investigation done by the police department.
Oh, that's a shame.
That's one of those things that I told you about the judges and the rules of civil procedure. That's when a judge would stop immediately when you ask that question, unless it said, please don't answer that. So please don't answer that.
I won't.
Okay. Sorry. I told you they don't always make sense, but they're there.
That doesn't make sense.
I hope the
I
cops
could
weren't all in
actually
the same
explain
army.
it. I'm
brigade
explaining to you
together.
later, and you can understand. It does, that could make sense from certain perspectives.
Is normal policy, I mean, if I'm in a criminal thing, they get my statement right away. Is there a normal policy that normally all these people involved would get statements? Seriously?
They do in car accidents.
There are circumstances involved in this one that no, there were not provided.
But is it
And-
policy?
Yeah. okay.
You shouldn't be allowed to take any inference because it's
A police
Yeah,
involved
you're right.
shooting. That's
Georgia
odd.
has reminded me to expect that the judge would give you what's called an inference instruction. In this case, the instruction would be that you are not to take any inference from the fact that there were no statements taken. There are circumstances which I, as the judge, will allow to be presented, but it should not infer that either party has any additional responsibility or negligence because there were no statements taken of the other police officers. But there were statements taken by witnesses. And as I said earlier, the plaintiff gets to go first in the court cases. And so each one of these people happen to have one key witness that they will present at trial. And I'd like to go ahead and begin, Ted, with your witness.
Can I use the diagram as I do this, or do you want me not to do that?
Will that diagram confuse us? I can't remember.
Will it confuse?
It's up to you.
Well,
Can you draw it?
I probably, let me look at it again, because I'm not sure.
Let's look at it. Well, we can look at it again.
I just want to
Each
give
one,
them,
because I know that they were reproduced off of their actual hand drawings.
But it's confusing. Trust me. Don't do it.
all right.
10 left, you're going east.
Yeah, the problem is, we don't have my guy in here on this drawing, and we don't have.
Can you add it? Why don't we just use that one?
So this, you're sure this is wrong?
North, south, east, west, east. See how slow gas vehicles. Either draw it brand new or use
All right,
Okay.
all right. I can probably do this without even drawing it, just to give you a.
Let me explain a little bit, maybe like the adverse inference and stuff. During depositions, witnesses were asked to make drawings, and there's a lot of emotion when they're actual picture taken. We don't know whether it goes in, but then, because we couldn't use the actual exhibits because we didn't want them to get messed up, we had the exhibits reproduced, and in one of those steps, there was some things that were a little bit backwards.
All right, so we're agreed that he was pulled over here. He was eastbound.
Yes.
And he was pulled over before the intersection.
Correct.
Right here. All right. So this witness' name is Alexander Powell. And Mr. Powell was located on this side of the road about if you were to assume this, can you all see this white car?
Yeah.
If you were to assume that this was my client's car pulled over here, Mr. Powell was right about in this vicinity with the police cars back here. So he was closer to the car that my guy was driving than the police, and he was on this side of the road. The construction work is on the opposite side of the road. I got that all right?
I think so.
Yeah. Okay, I think you need to know his perspective, and you want to know where the other witness was. And I'm going to give you just a little bit of information about Mr. Powell. He's a 22-year-old man. He's a fairly recent graduate of Brown University, where he got his major in cultural
Media.
He came to his deposition with a T-shirt that said "Students for Democracy," and he concedes that that is a group of students who are anti-establishment, that they protest and that they have kind of an anti-establishment bent. He doesn't characterize himself as being of any particular political bent, but he says other people might describe him as an anarchist. He thinks the police suck. All right? He was out for a walk, and as he was walking, he heard this commotion, and I will get this right again. He turned and looked, and he saw the car stopped, and he saw my client in the car, and he saw the police officers behind. He heard the yelling. He had trouble hearing what was being said. He got bits and pieces of what was being said. He believed from looking at my client in the car that he was Hispanic. In fact, he was even more specific and said he looked like he was a northern Mexican. He saw my client get out of the car. He clearly identified that he was holding a cell phone in his hand. He had no question in his mind about that. He heard Officer Lane say, "Drop the phone." He did not hear anything about a gun. He also heard my client yelling back, "I can't hear you." He saw my client's face. He said he did not look angry. He looked frightened. He looked confused. He did turn his head at one point, and Mr. Powell says it appeared to him he was trying to hear when he turned his head. He says that he saw Ali trip and go and fall forward and move his hands forward as if to break his fall when he was shot and 3 times, and it threw him back away from the police officers. He said this, from what he could see, it did not look at all like a gun. It was a cell phone. That's about it.
Okay. Georgia, cross-examination, if we can call it that.
Just one second. He's across the street.
According to this,
He's across the street. I don't care. I'm just talking about the deposition.
well, I just went from the phone.
He's across the street. He is. He's across the street. So he's across the street.
All right, so I'm sorry. He's over here. He's across the street, closer to this car, my client's car, than he is to the police. Right over here.
Mr. Powell is there. He's not on the same side. Okay? Each of these lanes is approximately 12 to 15 feet wide, so you can start counting up and you can see the distance that Mr. Powell was from the vehicle that Mr. Garcia was driving. Mr. Powell, 22. He works at a Whole Foods store. He has a degree in media culture, but he works in a Whole Foods store. He describes himself as being with SDS, Students for Democratic Society. He does say that he believes in direct action, and which is a protest group. That is his social and political view. He says not only cops suck in response to specific questions, but he believes all cops oppress people and try to ensure that hierarchy is maintained and that the wealthy maintain their wealth and that other people are oppressed. He also believes, and has stated under oath, that he believes all officers are racist. And he agrees that if people were to characterize him, they would call him an anarchist. Mr. Powell said a couple of things when he was questioned. He said that he could hear Officer Lane tell Mr. Garcia to get out of the car. He's across the street, and he could hear that. He said that he could hear Mr. Garcia told to get on the ground. The officer told him to get on the ground. These are statements by the plaintiff's witness. He said that as Mr. Garcia continued to walk forward, he described it from his perception as a stumble, but he says that as he started moving forward, his hands came down. His hands were above his head and his hands came down. And that's what, and he said, and it was at that point that he was shot. And those are the main.
Okay, very good. Before I ask if there's any, we do this in a courtroom. I'm right in front of the camera. In a courtroom, these witnesses, of course, would take the stand and be sworn in, and the plaintiff lawyer would get to ask the question first. I'll get right back to you. And then the defense lawyer would get to cross-examine. That's why I call it cross-examination, cross-statement. But also, the plaintiff lawyer gets to do what's called redirect. Now, I also want you to know what Georgia is reading from and what Ted is summarizing for you. It's what's called a deposition. You all may be very familiar with that. But in a deposition, both lawyers are present, and the person's asked questions. They're sworn in under oath, the same oath you have to take if you're actually on the stand. So understand what these lawyers are both talking about are sworn statements, which if they lie about, you could be accused of perjury and go to jail. So, redirect, Counselor?
Yeah, well, actually, and I have to tell you that technically, this, Georgia would object because it's not proper redirect, but I left out a really important fact.
Okay, go ahead.
We'll give a little leeway in this case.
Mr. Powell also, at the time this was happening, saw a woman pushing a stroller going across this crosswalk and testified that the police officers had a direct line of sight that this pedestrian with a baby in a carriage was crossing right in front of the area where they had their guns pointed. The other thing I guess I would say is that Powell was specifically asked about whether or not he had, why should we believe you're telling the truth in light of these attitudes you have about the police? And his answer was, well, first of all, I'm not a moron, and I wouldn't want to go to jail for being untruthful. So.
Okay, all right. Turn to page 15. I think we're on E, aren't we? Am I right? We're on E? I haven't been writing these down.
Yes.
Okay. I find Mr. Powell believable. Agree or disagree? Tell me how strongly and why you agree or disagree. I find Mr. Powell believable. Wouldn't do this kind of research when everything was finished in the case. If a lawyer is going to use this kind of research that you folks are helping us with today, and it is very important, what you do here does have an impact on cases. What focus groups do has an impact on cases. You wouldn't do it when everything was finished and set. And you may have figured out that these lawyers still have a little of what they call discovery that they're going to do, and there's some things that need to still be worked out. And that's where you folks are going to be so helpful to us. So when we're working on these diagrams and charts, that's part of what's going on here. So I think we have caucused and we've looked back through the depositions taken. I think we've got squared away of who was where. And I think as Georgia presents her witness, and I see we've got two people, only in Kim now. Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
So the construction was where the McDonald's is, right?
Yes. Yes. That's what we finally figured out.
And Walgreens or Safeway
Don't worry about it.
didn't have any surveillance?
No. Interesting question. Let's just say none at that time.
Are we waiting?
Yeah, we've got two people that are still out. Can you go see if you can locate Kim and Colin? Fine.
Was traffic stopped at all during the
I assume that it was, yes. Yes, it was.
I was shocked.
But as you know, the police officers that do that would be at the end of the block.